All right, guys, so Joe Biden is going to sign a George Floyd executive order. So the New York Times says Biden set to issue policing order on anniversary of Floyd killing. The order would direct all federal agencies to revise their use of force policies and create a national registry of officers hired for misconduct. President Biden on Wednesday is expected to issue an executive order aimed at reforming federal policing on the 2-year anniversary of the death of George Floyd, who died after being handcuffed and pinned to the ground by a Minneapolis police officer. People familiar with the matter said the order will direct all federal agencies to revise their use of force policies, create a national registry of officers fired for misconduct. That's interesting. Use grants to encourage state and local police to tighten restrictions on chokeholds and no-knock warrants and restrict the transfer of most military equipment to law enforcement agencies, the people said. They asked for anonymity to discuss the details of the order before it is announced. So look, all these things are good, but I think the thing that I'm hung up on is the weaselly language. So here's what I mean by that. So they want to revise the use of force policies. Well, what does revise mean? Like, revise them how? How are you going to revise them? Are you going to make them slightly better but still leave wiggle room for abuse? Because then that wouldn't be that great. Create a national registry for officer misconduct. Okay, that's good, but then what are you going to do with that? Is anybody on that registry now not allowed to be a cop anymore? Or do you just have the registry and you're not going to do anything with the information? Use grants to encourage state and local police to tighten restrictions on chokeholds and no-knock warrants. Okay, good, but tighten restrictions is different from, like, you should probably ban no-knock warrants, not just tighten them. And restrict the transfer of most military equipment to law enforcement agencies. Okay, good, but again, what is most? What is most? And what military equipment are they still going to be able to get? So these are all open questions. They asked for anonymity. I already read that. The White House and the Justice Department have been working on the order since last year, when efforts to strike a bipartisan compromise on a national policing overhaul failed in the Senate. Mr. Biden's executive order is expected to be more limited than that bill, a sign of the balancing act the president is trying to navigate on criminal justice. While the death of Mr. Floyd and the national protest movement it inspired helped drastically shift public opinion on matters of race and policing in summer 2020, Republicans have also launched political attacks that portray Democrats as the enemies of law enforcement. The order is unlikely to please either side entirely. Many progressive activists still want stronger limits and accountability measures, sorry for that ringing in the background, for the police, even as a rise in violent crime in some cities has become a Republican attack line heading into the midterm elections. But officials believe the order, whose final text has been closely held after the leak of an earlier draft earlier this year, will get some support from both activists and police. Mr. Biden plans to sign, I don't know if that's good news or bad news, by the way. Mr. Biden plans to sign the new executive order alongside relatives of Mr. Floyd and police officials in what is expected to be among his first official acts as he returns from a diplomatic trip to South Korea and Japan this week. So they go on to explain how police groups were upset with certain portions of some legislation they were pushing for, and maybe even some executive orders that they were going to sign. And so Biden then called up the police departments, the police, groups, and said, what are your issues with this? Let's talk it through. And then Biden revised it and changed some of the stuff to be something the police could support more. Again, I mean, look, there's an argument for how he's approaching this, but there's also an argument that, well, this is the problem, right? Is that you're listening too much to the special interest groups, whatever interest groups they may be, whether they're the police or activists, as opposed to just evaluating a policy based on the merits of the policy and making what you view as an objective decision in terms of what the correct path is. So again, the only thing I fear here, the executive orders are good, but the only thing I fear is the implementation of them. Like, how will they be enforced? And what's up with the weasel language? Like, when you say we're going to ban most military equipment going to the police, okay, well, what military equipment's going to be allowed? So my guess is, and this is just a guess, it's probably going to end up being like every other Biden executive order, which is a half measure at best, really more like a quarter measure. It's change in name, while really it's largely continuity and the status quo. So, look, I don't want to be too much of a downer. I hope that it's more than that, but certainly based on this article, you can't really come to that hardline conclusion. So we'll see, but I mean, shit, it only took 2 years or 2 summers since the George Floyd protest to get a little bit of movement in the right direction. we'll judge it when we look at the final piece of it, but in theory, what he's doing here is good. It'll really come down to the implementation and the specificity of the language. But clearly, he's trying very hard to walk that line between pleasing activists and pleasing the police. Because Biden is a very pro-police Democrat. He wrote the crime bill. When activists were saying defund the police, he was like, well, let's fund them more. So he's trying to... what he's trying to do is appease the activists while also appeasing the cops and getting Fox News off his ass as they say, Biden caved to the left and he's doing whatever the left activists want. So he's really looking at this more politically than anything else. I think the policy comes second. The politics of it comes first. But even if it ends up being a good executive order, I don't know how much this will affect the upcoming elections anyway, to be honest with you. Because unless he takes big, bold action that is universally viewed as positive, like legalizing marijuana or freeing nonviolent drug offenders or eliminating student loan debt, I don't think much is going to move the needle at this late date. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.